What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. Anthony Sanfilippo's here. I'm Bob Wankel. Phillies coming off of a 7-3 10-game road trip that included 2 stops on the West Coast. And Anthony, if they didn't bring Sir Anthony Dominguez with them on that road trip, they might have been 9-1, man.
Yeah, it's really kind of funny, Bob, because we sat here before the trip.
I got to stop you. We're a minute into this thing, and I hear sirens already in the background.
So just so you know,
if you're a listener of this show, you've got to have some concerns about Anthony's well-being.
I live on a main street. I mean, I'm back off the road, but I live on the main street, and so there's a lot of activity on my street, and the police tend to fly by. The ambulances tend to fly by. It happens a lot. Okay. Delco, man. It is what it is. So
hope everybody's safe out there. But go ahead. Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah,
but
I
wanted to ease everyone's concerns, dude.
Yeah, well, Baltimore Pike and Delco, man, I once wrote a story. We're talking going back about 20 some years to the Daily Times when I first started there, and it was called Pike's Peak, and it was a week-long look at why everybody hates Baltimore Pike, and part of it was traffic and crime and accidents and everything else. Like it's a very busy road. That's not the street I live on, but it's a very busy road that has a lot of angst around it. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of shops. There's a lot of people. Well, there's 3 Wawas now on Baltimore Pike in our area, like 4 blocks from each other. It's crazy.
So you're just where the action is. That's it.
That's it. That's right down in the heart of the action. But going back to where we were before we went on that tangent, a couple episodes ago, we talked about, hey, this road trip, you're happy if they come away 500. You're happy. You're accepting of it if they come away 500. If they get 6-4, you're happy. They did us one better. They went 7-3, and you're right. They could have been 9-1. Like, you could nitpick to the point and say that 7-3, okay, good, but they could have been even better. That's how good the Phillies have been playing baseball of late.
They have been good, and I would say, in fairness, that they also could have lost the last game against the Angels as well, as teams often do when they strike out 18 times. The Phillies had that vibe on Wednesday of a team that looked like they were finishing up a 10-game road trip and wanted to get on the plane and get the hell home. And that's the way they approached their at-bats in that game against an Angels pitching staff and starting pitcher in Sandoval, who's just not very good.
Right.
But, man, they certainly made him look good in that one. And it kind of leads me to this. As ugly as that game was, a win is a win. Zach Wheeler wasn't particularly sharp, and I do want to talk a little bit about that and the rest and kind of lean back into the rotation situation, something that you kind of were ahead of, and we're now seeing that play out. Like, guys aren't thrilled about the lack of rhythm here all of a sudden, and Wheeler spoke to that after the game on Wednesday. But my takeaway on Wednesday was like, damn, this offense was bad in this game, and they still found a way to win in a game where the starting pitcher, though he was effective, didn't give them a lot of length. And it kind of like leads me into what you talk about when you're watching the NFL and you hear analysts talk about elite teams, and they say teams are multiple, that they can beat you in so many different ways, and that they're so versatile in how they can attack an opponent. And that's sort of where I'm starting to get with this Phillies team. I know that if you look at each individual metric, they're not sitting at the top of every single ranking. I mean, we've talked about the bullpen ERA and the struggles there and how it's at the bottom of the league. So I'm not going to sit here and say this team doesn't have any holes in it, but they can beat you a lot of different ways. Like, you sit down and watch the Phillies play, and it's possible that they will just beat you over the head and hit 5 home runs. Top 5 in Major League Baseball in home runs per game, right? Like, they can just outslug you. They have that capability. They also have the capability to put out a starting pitcher 4 out of the 5 slots in the starting rotation right now that could go out there and just shut you down for 7 innings, and you win a game quietly 3-1, 4-2 on the strength of the starting pitching. Or you could even get to what we finally saw on Wednesday, which is the bullpen being asked to take down multiple innings with no margin for error. And they have the talent that should be able to do that on a consistent basis, even though we haven't yet really seen that. So I look at this team, and it's easy to get carried away when everything is so good. You follow up an 8-2 homestand with a 7-3 road trip. You're a half game out of first place. You're clearly one of the 5 best teams in baseball right now. It's so easy to come on here and piss positive all over this team, but they really are good, man. This is a good team, and if they play like they're capable of playing, it's very hard to imagine that they don't win the 93, 94 games that we were talking about back in the middle of March.
Yeah, not only that, Bob, I think that, I mean, the pace that they're on now, they're going to be higher than that. And I'm not convinced they're going to hit 100, but
I don't expect them to stay on that pace, which is why
right.
I still fall back to those numbers, but it's possible.
Yeah, no, but I'm looking at, like, at this point now, I look at it and say, yeah, this is a 96, 97 win team as opposed to 93, 94. They might have a few more than we thought. Yeah, and the beauty of it is that they have found, as you were pointing out, so many different ways to win games. Right? I mean, you can win a game with your starting pitching. You can win a game by just bludgeoning other teams, hitting 5 home runs in a game. You can win a game in which you strike out 18 times, right? like and still find a way to win because, in that one, the bullpen was really good, right? I mean, so it doesn't matter. The Phillies have an ability to beat you in a variety of ways. Maybe in the past you were sitting there and go, okay, well, it's a Zach Wheeler game, so we need Zach to win this game for us because the offense has been kind of inconsistent of late. Or you had somebody further down the rotation like Taijuan Walker, and he's like, oh, well, Walker's going to give up 4 runs, 5 runs, but the offense is rolling right now. They're going to win the game that way. But you now you look at it and say, on a given night, you don't know what it's going to be in a given night, but you're pretty confident that they're going to find a way to win a game regardless. There's not going to be many games this year. There's going to be, they will have clunkers. Nobody's immune to clunkers, but there's not going to be many nights this year where the game's over in the 3rd inning. And you're like, well, man, that's just not their night. Like, there's only going to be a handful of those.
Well, it's kind of weird. For years we've been doing this show, and it's always like, okay, here are the 4 problems that I have right now, and here's a little bit of good, and okay, thanks for listening. And right now it's hard to find a lot of problems. We've talked about Johan Rojas, and we've navigated that situation. Hits the big home run the other night, the same night that I record earlier in the day and say, I just don't think the guy can hit. And we do all of that. And so that box has been checked for now. There's really not a lot more to dig into there. Nick Castellanos, we'll see. I know he had the 0 for 4 on Wednesday, but he actually hit a couple balls hard that hooked just foul, where you could have been looking up and saying, hey, look at this, 2 for 4, a couple extra base hits.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Stay tuned. We know the talking points. We know the points of concern, the points of anxiety. So I don't want to keep hammering them over and over again, at least right now. But there is one thing that I would say is a little bit unsettled with this team, and it's the way that they're approaching the starting pitching. And we've had the Spencer Turnbull, Taijuan Walker conversation before, but it's real, and this is a little bit of an issue, and it's a good problem to have. It's a good problem to say, hey, we have 6 starting pitchers, and we're not entirely sure how we want to navigate this, but in the process, you've got to kind of come to a decision here because you're starting to see, I don't want to see cracks, and I don't want to say like a huge regression, but you can tell a guy like Zach Wheeler, after he struggles to find his command for really the 2nd straight start, he sort of battled it, even though he was really effective nonetheless. He basically has said what he's echoed in previous seasons, which is, I don't want the extra rest. It's another day I have to kind of sustain my rhythm. It messes me up. So last night there was a report, John Heyman out on Twitter, I guess maybe you saw it, saying the Phillies might keep Spencer Turnbull in the rotation. And now that seems to be where this is headed, that he's going to stay in a spot where he's still pitching bulk innings. What are they going to do here?
Yeah, I think ultimately what's going to happen is I think the piggyback is going to be an option for them, but I think that the first option is going to be Turnbull, and that Sanchez would come in if Turnbull doesn't have it, or he's high, his pitch count's high, and he's getting out after 4 innings.
How much has this thing escalated that Christopher Sanchez? We weren't 2 weeks ago talking about Christopher Sanchez potentially losing his hold on a rotation spot or potentially piggybacking or anything of that nature.
Yeah, and again, I don't necessarily think that this is a long-term response because they still need to see Taijuan Walker pitch, like
Yeah.
more than he pitched one game. And it was their fault that his numbers look as bad as they do. Because if you pull him out after 6 innings, it was actually an okay start.
Sure.
Leaving him in the 7th inning makes the numbers look a lot worse. They never should have left him in. But they need to see him pitch, 3 to 5 starts and kind of get a sense of where he's at and who he is. Is he, the guy? Can he get back to being that guy we talked about last year when he had those 13 starts where he was among the best pitchers in the game, right? I mean, if he can get back to being that, then you're like, okay, well, he stays in the rotation. But if he continues to be a guy who was kind of who they were dealing with at the latter half of the season last year, where he would get lit up in the first inning and then, have to battle through 5, maybe they look at it and say, you know what, we're better off with Sanchez in that spot. And I think that Sanchez is a guy who, has something of the 3, he's got something to work on. And we talked about, he's got his sinker doesn't play really well right now. It's got his changeup is great, but the sinker gets torched to the other opposing hitters, like just really smacking around the ball yard. So let's get that fixed, and maybe that's better, working it out of the bullpen in certain situations, short term, and then you can put them back in the rotation if need be. You keep them stretched out. So I think that that's kind of how they're gonna what they should do. And I think that that's the direction that they're going to go in. It seems like we'll find out when we get down there later today. Conversations will be had, I'm sure, and we'll figure it all out. But that's kind of how I see it at this point.
I think about a week ago, we talked a little bit about Taijuan Walker and exactly how much time you give him, given the competition, given that at the time Sanchez was really throwing the ball pretty well.
Yeah.
These past 2 starts have been a little bit rough for him, and certainly what Spencer Turnbull's done. And I think that you used 3 starts or 4 starts as sort of like the measuring stick.
Yeah.
Are you still on that train, or do you kind of say like they have to give him at least a month and a half to try to figure this out? Do you let him take the ball 7, 8 times and then say, let's go with our best 5, or just let things play out where maybe there is no, you no longer have the ability to even choose what you want to do. You're forced into a situation.
Yeah. I think it's a situation, Bob, where they'll have an idea of what they want to do after about 4 starts, but it may go beyond that, because it may require them to say, all right, what's the plan going to be? Let's see what he looks like after 4 starts, and then let's assess and talk about it at that point. And that might take another to get to where exactly you want it to be. It might take another couple weeks, whether a guy needs, maybe a throwing program kind of thing, like has to change a little bit or whatever. Like that's how I look at it. So it may end up being that 7 to 8 start window, but they might start making their decision after 4. If he's good after 4 starts, then it could go even longer. But if he's not good after 4 starts, I think then you're starting to look at, okay, maybe let's figure out a way to get Sanchez back in, or, go Sanchez and Turnbull and maybe make Walker a bullpen guy. I don't know.
What's amazing and impressive to me is that you see on Tuesday night, Spencer Turnbull go out there and, or was it Tuesday night? Did he go?
Yeah.
Or was it Monday night?
No, it was Tuesday. They won his game. Yeah.
Yeah, they won his game, right?
Yeah.
He's not particularly sharp. Like, he didn't quite have the same command that he's had in previous starts. But then you look at the final line, you're like, well, he didn't walk anyone.
Right.
And he only gave up 4 hits, and he only gave up 2 earned runs. And, are you being a little bit critical here? And I'm not being critical. It's actually it's kind of just speaks to where he's at right now as a pitcher. You look at him and you're like, this guy isn't even really on his game, and he's still nasty. Everything has crazy run. Everything is a tough at bat. So many awkward swings. He, to his credit, doesn't walk anybody, but he throws 98 pitches, only 60 for strikes. And you could tell he just wasn't really totally dialed in like he had been. And he's still been good. And I think that, to me, in a way, that start says even more about a guy. It's one thing to just be on a run where you're like, damn, he's locked in right now. I didn't really feel that he was totally locked in the other night and still got a good result out of it.
Well, yeah, and the thing of it is, Bob, is I think it was back-to-back starts. I mean, Turnbull didn't talk about it. Wheeler did. But, they each had to go an extra day. in between. And when you're on that, when you're a creature of habit, man, and you're on that routine of this is what I do on day 1, this is what I do day 2, 3, 4, and then 5, I'm pitching again, right? Like your body is trained for that. And then all of a sudden you throw a wrench in where it's like you have this extra day. Now, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
Oh, do I throw twice? Do I throw, do I give myself a complete off day? What do I do? Like and I think that can, when you're in the flow, that can knock you off just a little bit, not a ton. Obviously, Turnbull got through it and Wheeler got through it, right? They weren't sharp, but they were pretty good. But at the same time, yeah, there's a reason that they didn't look as good in those 2 starts as maybe they had previously. And I would bet you Aaron Nola is going to run into a similar thing tonight. I mean, let's be honest about it, okay? I mean, Nola's this is going to be 7 days rest for Nola. Like, this is crazy, like, to me. And that's why I questioned this earlier in the week. Like, why would you stop what's working?
Right.
Like, yeah, they'll adjust. They're athletes. They'll figure it out. But, you're rolling. Maybe you make that change when the team loses a couple in a row, right? And then you want to kind of restart things. But when the team's rolling, don't touch it. And that was kind of like, that was why I wrote that. And it was, you heard a couple guys complain about it. Well, one guy complained about it and saw 2 guys be a little off. And I guarantee you Nola will be the 3rd one tonight.
Spencer Turnbull this season, 0.84 whip. I mean, these numbers, 1.67 ERA, both lefties and righties each hitting under 200 against them. I mean, this has probably been the most stunning development of this season to date so far. And he's created a mess, hasn't he? I mean, he really has. This thing is a mess. You talked about Aaron Nola going tonight, and he's certainly been on a nice run as well. I will say this: I look at the betting odds, and I see this 15-17 Giants team coming in here that can't. Did you lose me there?
I did. Yeah, I lost you. Yeah, you're back.
What was the last thing you heard me say?
This 15-17 Giants team.
It's 15-17 Giants team comes in. They can't hit. Phillies are rolling right now, 21-11, 10 games over. Aaron Nola is one of the best pitchers in baseball. Like, I look at the betting odds and I see -145, -150, and I go, that's interesting. And I know that the Giants are going to throw Jordan Hicks tonight, who's been really good, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I do wonder a little bit, like, are the Phillies, as you look forward here, are they about to kind of hit one of these like little hiccups in the schedule? This Giants team is not particularly great, but what do you kind of expect this weekend when you come back and you come off the long road trip? I always feel like that first game off the long road trip is always a little bit of a problem. So
yeah, and you're spot on with that, and that's why I don't love the Phillies tonight. Yeah. I do think that this is an game for them, but I mean, what do I expect for the weekend? I expect them to probably split these 4.
So do I. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. I mean, I thought the Giants would be better than they've been, to be honest. I mean, if you remember, I thought they were a playoff team. And they've, some of the guys that they added late just have not been very good, or or injured in certain cases. So maybe that's part of it, and maybe eventually they'll be better. But yeah, this is a tough matchup for them, and I don't like Nola going 7 days rest, man. I just don't. I just think that there's something to, finding your pitches again, and just it maybe takes a little bit longer. He's got to battle through a couple of rough innings, and that's kind of how I see it. So if they split this weekend series, you're still 10 games over 500. You're taking.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Hicks has made 6 starts this season, and he has a .91 whip. Opponent's only hitting 181 against him. He's thrown 34 innings, and he has struck out 27. I'm actually a little surprised that the strikeout numbers are as low as they are for him. But, I mean, he has been very good for them. And if you really look at the pitching matchups across the board for the first 3 games, you have Keaton Winn going against Suarez, obviously advantage Suarez, but Winn has done a nice job so far early on. And then you got Logan Webb on Sunday. who's one of the best pitchers in the game, going up against Taijuan Walker. And so I would actually say head to head there, I would give the Giants the starting pitching advantage. So you look at these first 3 games of the series, and it's not like you're getting that guy that's coming in and you're saying, oh, we're going to blow his doors off, or, hey, we got a decided advantage in this matchup. We're going to rake tonight. So I do think that this is going to be a tough series, and I don't expect the Phillies to lose it, but I do think some of this momentum where they're ripping off win after win after win, I think that maybe comes to a halt here this weekend a little bit. But I will say, when you dig into the numbers on the Giants, just so people kind of understand what they're looking at this weekend when they come in, they are not hitting. They're 21st in baseball in runs per game, 3.78 runs per game. So the offense has struggled a little bit. And while the starting pitching has been decent, the bullpen has been an absolute nightmare. 5.32 ERA so far. Only the Rays and Angels have had worse bullpen numbers. And we talk about some of the Phillies' own struggles. The Phillies even have a better bullpen ERA than San Francisco coming into this series at 5.19. So if you can manage the early innings and you can get into that San Francisco bullpen, theoretically, that's where you should be able to make a little bit of noise and maybe have an advantage deeper into games.
Well, yeah, you would hope so. And you would hope that the offense, maybe you go back to their whole grind it out against the starter kind of at bats, right? Make them throw a lot of pitches. Even if you don't put up a lot of runs, maybe you get those good starting pitchers out of the game and, in the 5th inning, and you get into that bullpen, and then you have some opportunities to tack on some runs there. So, I think that the approach to facing the Giants is just that. Keep the game close. If you can't score early, and the Phillies have been great scoring early. I think that they've scored the first run on every game of the road trip in all 10 games. I'm pretty certain that that's accurate, that they scored the first runs in every game on the road trip. So if you can't score early, keep the game close and then get into the bullpen. And I think that's where you have a decided advantage over the Giants. They're going to need some guys who have been a little bit more inconsistent at the plate to start hitting a little bit. And it's funny that we sit here and talk about, you don't want to nitpick, and you don't. Phillies have the most wins of any team in baseball right now. They have 21 wins. Nobody else has 21 wins, even though they're a half game behind the Braves. So there is, it's hard to complain about things. But when you look at it, we know that the guys we've talked about that have been inconsistent, right? The bottom of the 3 guys at the bottom of the lineup. But really, where's Bryce been? He's just been kind of pedestrian, right? I mean, he's not been awful, but he's been pedestrian. Schwarber's got some home runs as usual, but he's still hitting 207, I think he's hitting, or maybe like right around that. Brandon Marsh has kind of taken a big plummet from where he started at the beginning of the year, right? JT's been kind of just okay offensively. So like you're talking about guys who you expect them to be really good, and they will be at some point, but they haven't been yet. So you could look at that, optimistically on one hand and say, oh, wow, they're 21-11 without these guys being consistently good. But then you can look at it on the other hand and say, well, when are they going to start getting consistent? Because you might need them, especially once you start playing some of these better teams.
Well, it's funny you mentioned all of the players that you just mentioned, and the guy you didn't mention again was Bryson Stott. And we previously had a quick conversation about him, and it seems that the consensus here is that we trust Bryson Stott. He's going to get it going. He's had some impact here lately. He actually had a big night or a big hit late in that Phillies comeback with the Castellanos and Rojas homers the other night. Let me just give you this real quick. A different way to think about this. Like, anybody can kind of just look and see, oh, he's hitting 225, 682 OPS, but last 7 games, he's hitting 227. Last 15 games, he's hitting 229. Last 30 games, he's hitting 225. He's kind of been consistently underwhelming when you look at this. And one of the trends that is starting to happen here is that he is not starting many games against left-handed pitching. And when you look at this and the way that is trending right now, let me just give you this. Last season, Bryson Stott started 142 regular season games for the Phillies. That's 88% of the games he started. Mm-hmm. This year, he started 25 out of 32 games. That's 78% of the games started by Bryson Stott. If you equate that out over 162 games, Bryson Stott right now is on pace to start 127 games. That's not a part-time player, but that is not the textbook definition of an everyday player. You look at some of the struggles, you look at how he's being used. Let me just start the conversation by asking you this. Does Bryson Stott start more than 135 games for the Phillies this year, or do you think that they continue to play him sort of roughly 80% of the time?
Yeah,
And
I
what
think
do you have to say about him?
Yeah, I think he will end up at 130 plus 135. That's a good number though. Because it's going to be somewhere around there. And you're talking about starting, or are you talking about
games
just
started?
Games started, right? Yeah, it'll be right around that. That's a good number, I think.
Because he obviously enters a lot of games late.
Yeah.
And so we all understand that. But I look at it and say, of course they want to get him in for certain matchups later in the game, but I thought coming in that he was a guy that you were just going to run out there at this point. After last season where he starts 142, I'm thinking to myself, he's 150 start guy at this point, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. And I still think he'll go over 135, but it might not be much over that. I mean, I think that's a good number that you set there. I'm not overly concerned about this because there was a stretch of time last season when they did the same thing and he was going good when they did it. And I used to have a lot of fans just, ping me on Twitter saying like, what the hell is Thompson doing? Why is Stott not in the lineup? He hits lefties well. And he was hitting lefties well, but he was still pulling him out of the lineup against tougher lefties. Now he did play Tuesday, and that was against a left-hander. So he did have a game against a lefty there. And had a big hit in that game. He had a double in the ninth inning. Now, that wasn't off of a lefty, but he did have a big hit in that game. So, I don't think it's a complete platoon type thing that they're thinking about, but I do think that they look at it and say, against certain left-handers, maybe the way that the stuff plays, that they don't particularly like having him in. Plus, you got to keep in mind that they have to find ways to get Merrifield at bats. Like if he's going to be a true number 10 guy on this team that can be such a super utility infield, outfield, come into the lineup, give you professional at bats, and I think he's gotten a hit in 5 straight games that he's played now, Merrifield. You're going to have to maybe give up a couple of games for Bryson Stott that you probably wouldn't have last year. Not a lot, but maybe like 3 to 5 games might have to go that direction that you probably would have played him a year ago. So you do have to take that into consideration as well. I think Stott's handling it kind of the same way Brandon Marsh handles it. Like, they're good teammates, man. They get it. They understand it. And they're not going to complain about it. Of course, everybody wants to play every day, but they're not going to complain about it. And one thing I think that was most noticeable about having all those guys out of the lineup on Wednesday was the game was 2-1. Everybody was striking out, and they had an opportunity late in the game to bat for. They did use Marsh to bat for Pache in the top of the night. Oh, here comes another one. So, here comes. I can hear it coming. I can hear it coming from down the street. There he goes.
There it is.
There it is. That was a emergency services vehicle. It wasn't even a cop or an ambulance. It was just one of those emergency services vehicles. Anyway, they didn't use Stott. They could have used Stott to bat there. Didn't use him. So it makes you think like that was a guaranteed you weren't playing at all type game. Like you're off no matter what.
Well, what I'm looking at here is just some of the batted ball stuff. If you look at the StatCast numbers, his average exit velocity in 2022 and 2023 was the exact same, 88.1 miles per hour. This year it's down to 85.5 miles per hour. It's actually a fairly significant decrease in average exit velocity, and his hard hit percentage has dropped from 35.2 to 28.4%. That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
You start to look at just where the ball's going. The pull rate is up. It's a career high 39.2%. It was only 33% last year. He hasn't been in the middle of the field as much. So a lot of the balls that he was back through the middle with a year ago are now being hooked a little bit more frequently. It's still a little bit early to really dive into that and say, oh, well, what's going on here? The chase rates and the swing percentages are all kind of the same, but I mean, he has not hit the ball consistently hard this season. And you just kind of keep an eye on it. Like, we're all like sitting here saying, hey, we have a lot of confidence in him. We know what type of hitter he can be. We know that he's a gamer and all those things, right? But hey, now we're 30 plus games into this thing. April's gone. Like to see a little bit more there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. I think that that's fair. And I think that they kind of, it's interesting because remember last year, Bob, when he was going so well, I mean, he mostly batted in the middle of that lineup. He used to be he was their 5 hitter for much of last year, right? They coming into the season, he was batting 8 this year. And I think a couple people kind of scratched their head about that a little bit. Like, wait, Bryson Stott's hitting 8? What the heck's going on? And I think it's mostly because they kind of saw it. They kind of saw that there needs to be another step in the progression for him. Again, we keep forgetting, like, this is only his 3rd full season with this team, right? I mean, for the most part. I mean, so it might take that this year to kind of get through, to get him where they need to get him, right? So I think that it's not a major concern, but I definitely think it's worth talking about for sure.
Okay, so you take a look at the Major League Baseball standings, and we focus on the National League East, and we see the Atlanta Braves are 20-9, 11 games over 500. They're 11-4 at home. They're 9-5 away. They score a shit ton of runs. Starting pitching is sort of stabilized after a rough stretch. Bullpen's been pretty good. Braves are finding a lot of ways to win late. They've won some games in goofy fashion, some miracle wins. Good on them. That's what they do. They win regular season baseball games. You take a look at the Braves schedule here coming up, and I don't know if you've seen it, but it gets pretty interesting. They're in Los Angeles this weekend for 3 games, and I had to stay up late again the next 2 nights to watch these. I'm really interested in watching these 2 teams play one another. So you see a big-time 3-game series with, I don't want to say huge implications, but there will be takes following that series. Then they play the Red Sox, who've really thrown the ball very well for a couple. And then they have the Mets, who have been okay. They have the Cubs, who have been good. The Padres are interesting. The Cubs again. Like, the Braves are about to really go on a 3-week run here of pretty good competition. And I know that the Phillies schedule, by no stretch of the imagination, is easy. They've got some challenges in there as well. But I would argue that I would rather have the Phillies schedule over the next 3 weeks than what the Braves are going to face. This is a very long-winded way of kind of setting up, like, hey, do the Phillies have an opportunity here as they reach Memorial Day to potentially be in first place?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes, Bob. Yes, they do have an opportunity. I think that, and I do think that at some point in this next 3 weeks, they're going to pass the Braves. And I know that seems like it's not really going out on a limb. You're only a half game behind them, right? But the Braves do have a couple games in hand. So even though you're a half game behind, Atlanta's has played 3 fewer games than you have. So there is that, and that will catch up when the Phillies go to.
Can I just say I wish that the games were reversed tonight? I sort of wish that the result of the Dodgers and Braves happened prior Phillies Giants, because if the Dodgers win, and then the Phillies don't jump the Braves tonight, I would have liked to have listened to Post Game Live and Barkan coming on and being like, championship teams take advantage of this opportunity. You can't let that one slip through the cracks. What did he say against after that game against Washington a couple weeks ago that we were talking about?
I know.
Like, this is the type of game that separates the men from the boys.
Yeah, I know, right?
Fast forward 3 weeks later, and the Phillies are 21-11.
No, you're spot on with that.
If Aaron Nola can't pitch tonight and step up and be a man against this Giants team, then what the fuck are we doing?
No, you're absolutely right. And no, but I do think that at some point here in this stretch, the Phillies are going to move ahead of Atlanta. The question then will be, can they stay ahead of Atlanta? And we'll look at the Braves will catch up in games about a month from now. That's when the Phillies go to London. And so they have 2 days off before those 2 London games against the Mets, and then a day off the day after, obviously for travel. So there's 3 days off in 5 days, which is weird, but that's because I got to go overseas. So that's when the Braves will catch up on a couple of games on the Phillies, and so maybe we'll have a better sense of where things are about a month from now. But I do agree with you. I looked at that schedule. I've and originally I thought that this Phillies stretch of games was going to be a lot tougher. That's coming up for them. If we're being really honest about it, when I looked at the calendar at the beginning of the year and I saw the beginning of May, I thought the Giants were a playoff team. I thought
they might be. I mean, that's the thing. I don't want to overreact after a month and say the Giants aren't a playoff team. I didn't think they were. This is kind of exactly what I thought the Giants were going to be. Not to sit here and kick my own ass or anything, but like, they're okay. Like we just talked about it. I think that they're going to split these 4 games. Like the Giants can beat you, and they will probably.
Yeah, and Toronto I thought was going to be a little bit better than they've been. They've really struggled.
I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, I mean, no one thought Miami was going to be this bad.
Crazy bad,
right?
Crazy bad.
And the Mets are about where you expected them to be. The Nationals, we thought that they were going to be better, and they have been. And then you go and play Texas after that before you get an easy series against Colorado. So like if you're looking at the next 3 weeks for the Phillies a month ago, this looked like a little bit more of a challenging stretch than it is.
Yeah.
That being said, the Phillies have to do what they've done so far, and that is take advantage of the weaker teams and go out and beat them. And, I don't know, 4, 6, 9, 13, 16, 19 games. I would say that the Phillies, if looking at these teams now, a month ago, I would have said you go 11-8 in those 19 games. You're in real good shape. Now you go 11-8 in that, you're probably a little disappointed.
Yeah, well, I actually think they're going to go. Like, if you gave me a number, like what do you? I don't want to say what do you predict, but I would say 11-8. I would. Yeah. I don't expect the Phillies to just continue to play at this 107 win pace or wherever they're at entering play tonight. I think that there's going to be a cool down here, and if you can cool down a little bit and still find yourself a couple games over 500 in that stretch, then I think that that's indicative of a good team. What you don't want to see happen is it go the other way, where you're 8-11 or God forbid worse. So to me, there is an opportunity here. The Phillies did a really good job after those first 10 days or so, where you're looking at it and going, here we go again. This is what the Phillies do, to really sort of put that in the rearview mirror, very quickly establish that, no, we're not doing this again. They've cleared all those hurdles. And now to get to this point, entering this weekend, basically neck and neck with Atlanta, it's a good place to be. I'm impressed. I think I'm impressed by what I've seen overall from them. And I would like to see them kind of take the next step here. I still don't expect the Phillies to win the division. I know that you predicted that they would. I'm sure that you have not changed your mind about that.
Nope.
I still don't think they're going to, but I do want to see them not just compete. Like, I don't want to just see, oh, well, we're 3 games out. We're within arm's length at all times. Go past this team for a little bit. Like, go see if you can get up 2 or 3 games. Make them play from behind just a little bit. Give them something to think about.
Absolutely.
And I think that opportunity is there for them right now. And let's see if they can take advantage of it.
Yeah, and it's funny. I wrote in a story the other day, Bob, that the Phillies don't play a team with the rest of the May that they have a better record than them. That's funny to say. Obviously, they have the second best record in baseball percentage-wise behind Atlanta, and they're only a half game behind them. So really, technically, after tonight, the Phillies could have the best record in baseball. If the Phillies win, the Braves lose, Phillies have the best record in baseball. But the reality of it is that could go on for a long time. Like you're every series now that you're going to play a team that's behind you.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and so. Do we then look at those games differently? Because you sit there and saying, as each series comes up, you look at it and go, well, this team's not as good as you. Well, this team's not as good as you.
And you know what's interesting too? Not only that, but it's May 3rd. And I feel like people, especially now that the Sixers are over, and that was a good series and all of that was highly entertaining. And I don't have a lot of boohoo Sixers takes here. I think It's kind of what they are. They just weren't good enough.
Yeah.
But like, there's going to be anticipation basically on a daily basis for these games. Like, it's like, what time? 640 here yet? Are we doing this? Like, let's go. I think people are really juiced up for this. And I even myself, you and I love baseball. 640 comes around no matter what's going on, we're in.
Yeah.
But like, I feel myself a little bit more interested even this early in the season. Like last year, they dug themselves the hole. And I sort of thought they might get out of it eventually, but like I just was like, oh, this is such a slog. Like there was that World Series hangover, sort of like you play in October and then you fast forward and it's April, May, and you're like, oh, these games just don't have juice to them. I kind of have juice right now for May 3rd. I do. And so it's going to be really interesting to sort of just watch this on a daily basis and really see if this team can put together that type of magical season. That's what you're talking about right now after a month. It's not, hey, well, they're kind of 500. Can they get back into the division race? Can they win 90 games? Like right now, the thought is, could they have a magical season? One of those years that you're talking about it 20 years from now. Because if you think about 22, right?
Yeah.
Think about the regular season of 22.
Nobody cares.
What do you really remember about that season other than, Girardi getting fired and maybe the only thing that really jumps out to me, honestly, about 22 is that first series against the Angels.
Yeah.
And sweeping them and having that crazy comeback on the Sunday game to complete the sweep. And you're like, all right, they're alive.
Yeah.
I don't really have like a lot of memories of the 22 season.
No, my memories of the 22 season, Bob, were because if you remember, and I will toot my own horn. I was the guy who kept saying, there's something about this team. I'm seeing something with this team. I think that there's something here that this team can make a long run. I didn't predict a World Series, but I kind of felt something. And so like, I kind of remember, because I remember talking to my sons about it and they're like, Dad, you're nuts. This team's, they're going to fall apart in September like they always do. And I just like, there's something different, but you're right. As far as like individual memories of that 22 season, nothing really stands out. You sit there and go, oh my God, that was such a turning point game for them. It really, like, it was just kind of climbing back in. And then the only thing you remember, the game Nola almost pitches the no-hitter against Houston to clinch the wild card berth, right? But that's it. I mean, as far as
all of your memories come in October, because and that's sort of the way that the fan base viewed that whole season too. It was like, I remember that they were on pace to potentially blow it again, and we're like, here we go, same old shit. And it was, I think, very late in the season, they're at like Washington pissing away their season, and I'm like, thank God this Eagles team is good.
Yeah, and Milwaukee pissed away their chance to beat them, right? So they got a little bit of help at the end of the year. And those games in Washington, it was pouring rain, if you remember. Like, that's what we kind of remember about them. Like, they're going to choke this away, and then they snuck in, and then it was just holy hell.
And then you look at it now, you're like, oh, the 22 Phillies. I mean, they were in the World Series. What a great team. And you're like, team sucked for 5 months. I mean, I know they did play, in fairness, from July forward at a very high level consistently. I don't want to say they sucked, but it was not really like a memorable team until you get to game 1 in St. Louis. And like the switch totally flipped. And the point being is that this team, I think, has an opportunity to be a memorable team where you have a number of moments. I mean, one of the things that happens around here, and as time goes on, you learn a lot of those 93 Phillies guys weren't the best dudes. We all thought they were at the time, but as more comes out and time goes on, you go like, oof. But that team, I mean, I was 8 years old, Anthony, and I could single out a number of games from that season. Not even knowing the end result of what was going to happen. But like, you have the Mariano Duncan Grand Slam on Mother's Day. I remember stupid things that, like, you're like, how the hell do you remember this? Do you remember Butch Henry?
Well, I remember the player.
Yeah, he was a pitcher. Dave Holland used to destroy Butch Henry. And I remember like that being a talking point that season. And like, there was a game where he just lit up Butch Henry. I remember Pete Incaviglia hitting a key grand slam.
Yeah.
I remember the Milt Thompson catch out in San Diego. And then obviously you have the doubleheader with the Padres and all of those things that are easier to remember. But there were just a number of days and memories in that season. And I'd like to see the Phillies put together one of those here.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've been sitting here as you've been talking about it, and you brought this up, and I was trying to think of what this season could compare to. And 93 was the first thing that came to mind because, yeah, there were all those games in 93, regular season games that you remember and they stick out. And so, well, why do you remember those individual regular season games in 93? And I think ultimately the rationale behind that is that we weren't expecting anything of those Phillies. They got off to such a fantastic start. I think they were 17-5 in April. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, we have a legitimate team here. And like everybody got just on board, at once. Every other team in town kind of sucked then too. The Eagles were okay. But the Flyers sucked. The Sixers weren't very good. So it was like, okay, wow, we have a chance at a winner here. I guess this is the most anticipated season for baseball fans since 2011. I would say is fair. But what makes this different than that is that team at least had won, right? They won the World Series in 2008. And so, okay, 2009. Okay, they went back to the World Series. 2010, they went out NLCS. All right, but now we got the greatest pitching staff ever, and we're going to go get that second ring. And then they didn't do it. They fail. But I think that's where, every game, you were hanging on every game in the regular season with that team.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of the last time that fans in this city were hanging on every regular season game for a team. And they had not recently won. And I think it goes back to 1980, Bob, because you had a great divisional race that year between the Phillies and the Expos all year long. And it came down, obviously, the final series of the season in Montreal. But there were moments all along the way in that season where it was like, they're trying to come back. Oh, they're behind. They lost a doubleheader to the Mets. I think they're 5 games out. Oh my God, they're going to blow this. They're not going to make it. And then they come back. But you were hanging in every game. I know it's before your time, but I mean, that's really the last time that the Phillies were in like this hardcore race for the division with the thought that maybe they could win a World Series also, like right there with it. Like 11 was great because they just ran away with the division. They had best record in baseball, set a franchise record, 102 wins. And then, of course, they gag it against the Cardinals. But the reality of it was that there was never a race that year, right? It was just get us to October, right? This is there's a race, and they've created a race
against a team that you have a very interesting recent history with as well.
Correct.
And I'll dial and tap back into something. I kind of wish we led the show with this conversation, man. I think we fucked this up. Maybe we can get Russ to just flip this around or something.
There you go. Yeah.
Maybe I'll have him put a note like, hey, if you really want the better conversation, just go to about the 35-minute mark.
There you go.
I'll tap back into something you said late last season, which is if the Phillies can win the World Series, if they can win this whole thing, this will go down as one of the most loved teams, maybe the most loved team in the history of the city. Do you think that we are back into that realm here? Because last year hurt, right? There were some bad feelings about how everything went down. People kind of felt burned by the Phillies.
Yeah.
Are we right back there though with this group? Like I just go through it and you think about 93 at the time, people loved Dykstra. Obviously everyone loved Dalton. Everyone loved, a number of those guys, Kruk. And at the time, people liked Curt Schilling.
Yeah.
If his teammates didn't like Curt Schilling, but there was a lot going on there that people were really into, and the underdog aspect of it. And the Phillies don't have the underdog element to it. There are a lot of superstars on this team. There are a lot of highly paid guys on this team that they can't play that card. But you just look at the personalities. I mean, this city loves Ranger Suarez. You see the camaraderie between, and I know there was a story about it this week, between Alec Boehm and Brandon Marsh, and the story with Boehm obviously overcoming everything that he did a couple of years ago with the fans. Brandon Marsh is a fan favorite. Bryce Harper is a superstar. People love Kyle Schwarber because he looks like them and can hit the ball 430 feet at any given time. There's a lot on this team to really like, and there's a lot of individual guys to really like. And I just wonder if there's a possibility here, if this team really goes and does it, like, do they go straight to the top right away?
Well, we talked about this last year.
Or like, are we building statues of these guys outside of Citizens Bank Park?
We talked about this last year. Like, I was of the mindset at, down the stretch last year, once they got into the playoffs and they beat the Braves again, and everybody was on electric that this team was going to win a World Series last year, including us. Like we were kind of on, once they beat Atlanta, we kind of felt they were going to win it. And I stand by this, and I still stand by this, that if this group of players wins a championship here, it'll be the most beloved team in the city's history. And it's funny that we're talking about this now. ESPN put out a story, I think he put it out today, maybe it was yesterday, about Bryce Harper and how he's become, so representative of the city of Philadelphia, and he's the biggest star in town, and what it means. And the author there, Jesse Rogers, did a really nice job interviewing a number of people around the sport and around the Phillies about it. And he even said that this team, if they win, has a chance to be the most loved Philadelphia sports team ever. And I think that that's legitimate. I think that this city is ready to have that happen. And when you say build statues to these guys, maybe not go that far, but I do think that they will be welcome here for, free meals, free drinks forever and ever and ever, if they could be the team to bring a world championship back to Philadelphia.
And if you're listening to this, you're like, yo, guys, it's May 3rd. They're 10 games over. Like, you're getting a little carried away. Like, no, we're not. It's just, do you want to come on here and bitch today? Like, let's be positive. Let's look forward and really think about this. Today's a good day to do that, because Monday we'll probably be bitching again. So
no, but it's not that. It's not like it's just discussing who this group of guys is, right? I mean, and that's what I'm trying. That's what we're trying to say.
Let me give you a quick exercise here, and I know that there's 26 names. I'm going to do this as quickly as possible, so rapid fire. And the question is this: will this player be inducted into the Phillies Wall of Fame?
There you go. Good question.
Okay, ready? Yeah. Rapid fire. I want to do a count. Schwarber.
Yeah. Yes.
Rojas.
No.
Pache.
No.
Merrifield.
No.
Marsh.
No.
Ooh, Castellanos.
No.
Turner.
Yes.
Stott.
Yes.
Sosa.
No.
Harper.
Yes.
Bohm.
No.
Ooh. Stubbs.
No.
Real Muto.
That's a tough one.
Dude, Mike Lieberthal's on the fucking thing.
Yeah, I know. Maybe.
Dude, this was a slam dunk. Are you kidding me?
I don't think it's a slam dunk, but I'll say yes.
Mike Lieberthal is on the Wall of Fame.
Yeah, but Mike Lieberthal's on the Wall of Fame just because there was such a long era of bad Phillies teams that they had to put somebody in, right? So that was the only reason.
Wow, that's controversial. All right, so you didn't actually give me the definitive answer.
I'll go yes, but I'm not. I'm more on the fence with that one.
And I'm sorry. Did you say Stott? Yes.
Yes, I did say Stott. Yes.
Okay, so we're up to 5, by the way. All right.
Yeah.
Wheeler.
Yes.
Walker.
No.
Turnbull.
No.
Suarez.
Yes.
Strom.
No.
Soto.
No.
Sanchez.
No.
Nola.
Yes.
Marte.
No.
Kirkering.
No. Although maybe I shouldn't be so.
Right?
Maybe I shouldn't be so quick to say no on Kirkering. He's so young. That's impossible down the line. But yeah. As of now, no. No.
Dominguez.
No.
Alvarado.
No. And
I think Alvarado's actually got a shot.
I think he's got a shot, but I'm still on the no side.
Yeah, so that's 8 guys though. That's 8 guys with a couple interesting no's. So is there a world where Kirkering develops into that guy? Maybe. Is there a world where Alvarado gets the final out of a World Series and is on it? Maybe.
Well, I mean, and look, and I gave you no's on.
You said that the MVP of the National League won't be on the Phillies Wall of Fame. Come on, man.
I was about to say, Marsh and Bohm, I said no on those guys, but I mean, it's certainly possible.
So if Alvarado, I would agree, Alvarado's probably a no, but Marsh and Bohm could be, maybe. Yeah. It's going to require a championship, because what happens is you win a championship. Invariably, some of these guys will have moments, and then their status is elevated to a different level, and then all of a sudden it's, wow, yeah. Think about it. Think about the 2017 Eagles, even just 7 years later. I have very fond memories of Alshon Jeffrey. Alshon Jeffrey had one good season here and probably cost the Eagles a chance to play in the NFC Championship game the following season with a terrible drop late in the game against the Saints. But I have very fond memories of Alshon Jeffrey because they won.
Right.
A guy like Corey Clement, like fucking rotational running back, but
Yeah.
he had a moment in the Super Bowl, and for my money, like, dude, all timer, like,
Yeah.
so obviously winning the championship really does change everything. But point being, you're looking at roughly 1/3 of this roster right now, even if they don't win a championship, probably on Philly's Wall of Fame, which I think also ties back into the greater point that not only are they likable and interesting and they're funny post game and there's a lot of moments, but there's a lot of really good players that stack up favorably in this franchise's very long and often disappointing history.
For sure. Yeah. And I can guarantee you that if they win the World Series this year, 2034, they'll all be back. the 2039, 2044 for all the ceremonies.
You could get a lot of mileage out of that group.
Yes, this group will, because they like each other so much, right? They'll come back. Yeah. They'll be here. So like that's the thing, and that's why I think that long term that they would be that fondly remembered.
Yeah. All right, let's get to one last thing and wrap it up then.
Yeah, and so it's interesting, Bob. For one last thing today, we actually had someone tweet at us yesterday.
Yes.
It's at Irish Eagle, Tom Ballisti, pointing out the story about Comcast cutting all of the Diamond Sports regional sports networks from their service because they couldn't come to a new contract. And so there are 12 teams that have Diamonds that are under the Diamond Sports umbrella for regional broadcasts of their baseball games. 4 of them, they have an alternative option, but there are 8 teams currently that do not have. If you have Comcast cable and you are a fan of one of those 8 teams, you cannot watch your team.
Yeah.
And so I think it's worth bringing up, not to say that it's going to ever happen here, because if regional sports networks go by the boards, and they ultimately will be going by the boards, whether it's in the next 3, 5, 7 years, whatever it is, the last soldier standing will be Comcast Philadelphia. I mean, NBC Sports Philadelphia will be the last one, because it's a Comcast entity. But the reality of it is that, first of all, can you imagine being a fan of one of those 8 teams and not being able to watch your team play? Right. So what do you do? Like, do you bail out on Comcast as your internet provider and go somewhere else to, try and find another?
Well, like let's think about it. Let's just say the dynamics were different here. And if you didn't have access to the Phillies through your provider, I mean, what would you do?
Yeah.
I mean, you almost have to.
Right. I mean, but the thing that I find frustrating is, because like I have the MLB package, right, through Amazon Prime. I got their package there, but
like those 8 teams, like you can't.
Well, I can watch watch those games because it's not through Comcast; it's through Prime. So I can still watch all those games. Plus they offer the home team, road team. Like you could watch the opposite. Like so they're available to me. But in those markets, and it's interesting what they determine to be markets, because it goes well outside of the actual city. They can't offer those games those teams are blacked out, and they can't offer to lift the blackout so that fans can watch it through that app, for example, because they have a contract with Diamond Sports that says that they won't do it, right? So it's weird. Like, here's this company that's going bankrupt and may not get out of bankruptcy, that has all the rights to these 8 teams, and they can't get a deal with Comcast, right, to air their games, so fans can't watch it. But then the alternative that fans might have, they can't lift the blackout because the bankrupt company has a contract, right? It's bad for the sport. It's bad for sports in general.
Yeah.
For sports. And right now, it's not affecting the NHL or the NBA because they're in their playoffs. So that's national. Those teams are on national feeds. But by the fall, if this isn't resolved, it's going to impact the NBA and the NHL as well. So, like, what do you do? Like, how does this get resolved? Major League Baseball has to step in, don't they?
I guess so. I listen. I mean, I'll be direct with you. It's beyond my scope of really knowledge or understanding. It's terrible for the sport, and it has to get fixed. And it's one of these things where every so often there's a story that comes up. I will say this: every now and then a story comes up where you're just like, I can't believe in 2024 that this is what is happening, that people can't get access
I know,
to,
right?
like, I'm not saying that this is water and air and basic human rights, but like, can't get access to your baseball team and market. Like,
Yeah.
how are we letting this happen? It's
Yeah.
yeah.
It's really, really bad. That's why I think ultimately what's going to happen here, Bob, is I think sports teams in general, except for the NFL, because it's a whole different animal. But the
You
other
think they
three,
just go like direct to consumer? Like, hey,
yeah,
like,
I think they're
we
going to.
are going to own our own rights, and
Yeah, and I think what they'll do is I think that they'll put it out, like, your teams might, put their own rights up for bid to different streaming services and say, all right, who wants us? And
right,
maybe the Flyers end up on Peacock and the Phillies end up on Prime and the Sixers end up on whatever, like Hulu
right.
or whatever, just the way it works. And so, yeah, you're going to have to, that could be a frustration for fans too, because then it's like, oh, I have to have all these different services if I want to watch all these different teams. But the teams aren't going to think, they're not going to care about what the other teams in market are doing. They're only going to care about themselves and their fans. And so they're going to make a deal that works best for them. And I think that that's where we're headed. And so it's really kind of crazy that it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, that's one thing that you guys do with the Flyers, obviously, and the intermission shows and press row and all that. Like, it's a more immersive experience. And I wonder if in time, what you guys are doing is essentially a model for even baseball teams. Like, if you're the Phillies, wouldn't it be kind of interesting? And pick your analyst, pick your host, whoever you want it to be, but you have your main feed. People can watch the games as they do in a similar type of traditional broadcast format. But you as the team are supplying the fan with other ways to consume the game and listen to analysis almost even simultaneously.
Yeah.
Where you say, like, come to Phillies.com and check out this in-game banter, between two or three guys breaking it down. And you say, well, that directs eyeballs off the main feed, but who cares? It's just another way to engage your fan base. And as we know, the way that people consume sports is evolving, and the platforms that they use and the type of content that they want is evolving.
Yeah.
So, why not add that other layer to it?
The Manning cast, I think, was so important for the broadcast medium in the way that they do it for Monday Night Football, that I think every team is ultimately going to have that as an alternative option that they provide. And you might still have that, hey, it's going to go, if you want to watch the traditional broadcast of it, it's going to be here, but come to our website or go to our YouTube page and we'll have these guys watching the game with you and talking about it as it's happening.
You just have to get the guys right. Like, the Mannings are good. I'm not going to be a dick here and name three guys that I don't respect that are in the Phillies environment of.
No, I hear what
media.
you're saying.
But imagine if you have the wrong two or three guys sitting there talking about it. You're like, no, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to get the guys right, but the concept is very interesting.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that's what it's going to be, and it's not that far off. I think you're within the next 5 years. I think that's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, for Anthony Sanfilippo, I'm Bob Wankel. You can follow Anthony on X at AntSanPhilly. You can follow me at Bob_Wankel. Check out my newsletter, which is not being delivered today. See you on Monday because we had to give you this show. The show took priority over the newsletter today, and there's only so much time. But you can go to redoctoberphilly.com to subscribe and read that. And we will be back on Monday after, we hope, a Sunday night baseball game, weather permitting, and we'll pick it up ahead of the final game of the series against the Giants. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.